This happened to me in December 2021. I've never written this down before. I don't really talk about it either. Not because I don't remember what happened, but because I remember it too well. It's the kind of memory that sticks like gum to your brain. Annoying, sour, and impossible to scrape off no matter how hard you try. I was flying from Chicago to Seattle on a red-eye flight, Flight 237, with a budget airline I'd used maybe once or twice before. It was cheap and I was broke. I had just gotten laid off from my job at a call center, and I was heading west to stay with my older brother for a while I figured things out. The flight was scheduled to leave O'Hare at 11:15 p.m., arriving in Seattle a little after 1:30 a.m. Pacific time. I remember checking the ticket at the gate 3 times. Flight 237. Everything seemed normal. I boarded the plane with maybe 40 or 50 others. The aircraft was small, a single aisle, 3 seats on each side. I was in 14A, a window seat. The man sitting next to me in 14B was probably in his late 40s. Gray beard, black beanie, staring at his phone like he was hypnotized. The third seat in our row stayed empty. I remember a couple weird things even before we took off. First, the pilot didn't speak. I mean, we heard the safety speech from the flight attendant, a tall, robotic woman with platinum blonde hair and an unsettlingly blank expression. But the pilot never introduced himself. No hello from the cockpit, no estimated arrival, nothing. Second, I noticed that the flight number wasn't displayed on the overhead monitors. It just said, "Welcome aboard." No Flight 237, no airline logo, just that static welcome screen. It bugged me, but I didn't think much of it at the time. 1:18 a.m. Cruising altitude. I must have drifted off shortly after takeoff. I remember feeling the plane ascend and then just closing my eyes. I woke up to a strange humming noise. And not the normal engine drone. This was deeper, more guttural, like something vibrating behind the walls of the aircraft. I looked out the window. Total blackness. I should have seen city lights. We were over the Midwest. There should have been towns or highways or even distant airport lights. But there was nothing. I checked the screen in front of me. Still no flight info, just welcome aboard. I leaned toward the man in 14B. "Hey, you awake?" He turned to look at me slowly. His eyes were bloodshot. Like, really bloodshot. The whites barely visible behind red, veiny webs. He didn't say anything, just stared at me for a second, and then turned back toward the aisle. That's when I started noticing other passengers. They weren't right. A few rows ahead, a woman was sitting bolt upright, completely still. Not reading, not sleeping, just frozen. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking. 3 rows behind me, a kid was rocking back and forth, whispering something too low to hear. The flight attendant passed by, and I tried to stop her. "Excuse me." She didn't even glance at me, just kept walking. 1:36 a.m. No signal. I pulled out my phone. No service, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth. Even the time on my lock screen was stuck at 1:36 a.m. It wouldn't change no matter how long I stared at it. I stood up, trying to get someone's attention. "Hey, is anyone else noticing this? The time's not moving." Nobody responded. The guy next to me was now murmuring something under his breath. It sounded like numbers, repeating the same 3 over and over. 2, 3, 7. 2, 3, 7. Flight 237. That's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. I couldn't feel any motion. Planes always rumble or shake a little. You can feel the engines, the pressure changes, the slight dips and corrections. But this plane felt still, like we weren't flying at all, like we were just hanging there, suspended in some void. I unbuckled my seatbelt and walked slowly down the aisle. 1:36 a.m. Still, I passed at least 20 passengers. Every single one of them was awake. Every single one was perfectly still. One guy had tears running down his face, but he wasn't blinking or moving, just silently crying. A woman clutched a rosary in her hands, but her lips weren't moving. I reached the front galley. No flight attendant. I peeked behind the curtain toward the cockpit. The door was open. That never happens. My heart was hammering now. I took one cautious step into the cockpit and froze. The pilot and co-pilot were both there, but they were gone. Like, gone inside themselves. Their heads were tilted up, like they were staring into some invisible light above them. Their mouths were open, and a faint droning sound was coming out, like low-frequency radio static. Their hands rested on the controls, completely limp. I backed out of the cockpit in a panic. When I turned around, the flight attendant was standing in the aisle, staring directly at me and smiling. "You shouldn't be up." That's what she said. But her mouth didn't move. I heard the words, "I swear I did," but her lips didn't even twitch. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, back into the cabin. But now it was different. The seats were no longer aligned. Some were twisted sideways. Some were facing the wrong direction. One row of seats was just gone, replaced with empty floor space. And the passengers, they weren't people anymore. Their eyes were completely black, mouths hanging open, still frozen, still whispering numbers I couldn't understand. The lights dimmed. A voice, not the pilot, not the flight attendant, came over the intercom. It sounded warped, like a recording played backward. I couldn't make out the words, except one, descent. We were going down, but the outside still showed nothing but darkness. I sat back in my seat and closed my eyes. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I told myself I was dreaming, hallucinating, anything. And then, just like that, the plane jolted. A flash of light outside. A city. Runway lights. I opened my eyes. We were landing. Everyone around me blinked, stirred, yawned, as if waking from a nap. No black eyes, no weird whispers, just normal people. The flight attendant walked down the aisle with that same fake smile. "Welcome to Seattle," she said. I stumbled out of the plane in a daze. The airport was nearly empty. I walked straight to the nearest help desk and asked about the flight. "Flight 237? From Chicago?" I asked. The woman behind the counter typed for a few seconds, then frowned. "I'm sorry. There's no Flight 237 on record from O'Hare tonight. Are you sure about the number?" I showed her my boarding pass. She tilted her head. "This airline hasn't used that flight number in years. In fact," she looked more closely, "this logo doesn't match the current branding at all. Are you sure this is from today?" I looked down at the paper in my hand. It was blank. Just a folded, torn slip of paper. No barcode, no name, no flight information. I walked out of the airport in total silence. It's been almost 4 years since that night. Every so often I search for news about Flight 237. Nothing ever comes up. There are no records, no crash reports, no old schedules. It's like that flight never existed. But I remember it. I still hear the humming sometimes, usually late at night, when everything's quiet. I'll wake up and swear I'm back on that plane, still stuck in the dark, still flying, still waiting to land. This happened to me last year, on a flight from New York to London. I haven't told anyone about it. Not my girlfriend, not my therapist, not even my closest friend, who's an aviation nerd and would normally love to hear anything plane-related. Because I know what the first question would be. How can you wake up on a plane and be the only one on board? It was an overnight international flight, JFK to Heathrow. My company had booked it for me last minute for a conference. They splurged on business class, which was a first for me. I remember feeling awkward boarding before most people, sipping cheap champagne in a chair that turned into a bed. Honestly, I fell asleep before takeoff. That's how comfortable it was. Last I remember, the plane was taxiing. The hum of the engines and the soft vibrations of the fuselage put me right out. When I woke up, it was quiet. Too quiet. Something was wrong. I sat up, blinking. The lights were dimmed, which made sense for an overnight flight. But I couldn't hear anything. No engine noise, no flight attendants, no passengers talking or snoring or watching movies. Just silence. At first, I figured everyone was just asleep. Maybe I woke up during a smooth stretch of the flight and everyone was knocked out like me. But the silence, that dead, static kind of silence, started crawling under my skin. Then I noticed the TV screen in front of me was frozen. The movie I had cued earlier, The Martian, ironically, was paused. The timestamp read 0000, like it had never played. I reached for my phone. No signal, no Wi-Fi, no battery percentage. The clock was blank. Now I was fully awake. I unbuckled and peeked over the partition. Every business class seat was empty. Every single one. I stood, called out, "Hello?" But my voice felt swallowed by the air around me. I made my way toward the back, past the curtain separating business from economy. The curtain had been drawn open already. That was weird. Normally they keep that shut. And then I saw it. The entire economy section was empty. Hundreds of seats, no blankets, no dropped earbuds, not even trash in the seat pockets. It looked untouched, like the plane was prepped for boarding not halfway across the Atlantic. The most terrifying part? The seatbelt signs were off, which meant we were cruising. This thing was flying, with no one flying it. I ran forward, heart pounding, heading toward the cockpit. I expected the door to be locked, because it always is. But this time, it was slightly open. Just enough to see that faint orange glow of instruments inside. I knocked once. "Hello? Captain?" No response. I pushed the door open. There were no pilots. The seats were empty. The controls were lit up. The flight systems were running. Altitude steady, autopilot engaged, but nobody was there. And outside the window? Just thick gray clouds. No stars, no lights, no ocean. Like we were trapped in some endless mist. Something flickered. As I stepped back out of the cockpit, the lights in the cabin flickered. Just once. But long enough for me to see something, someone, standing halfway down the aisle. A tall silhouette. Still. Silent. When the lights came back, it was gone. I froze, suddenly feeling like I had been watched the entire time. Then, the PA system crackled. Not a message, not a voice, just breathing. Ragged, wet. Like someone was leaning into the microphone and exhaling directly into my ears. I tried every door. The lavatories were locked from the inside, all of them. I banged, shouted, pleaded. Nothing. I opened overhead bins at random, thinking maybe someone was playing a prank or hiding, but they were all empty. I opened the galley drawers. Empty. No food trays, no utensils, no garbage bags. It was like no one had ever boarded this flight. And then I saw it. Row 46D. One seat had something resting on it. I walked back slowly, breath shallow, arms stiff at my sides. It was a passport. I picked it up. It was mine. Inside the passport was a boarding pass. JFK to Heathrow. Seat 46. Date, March 11th, 2024. My seat had been 1A business class. I checked again. 46D, this was economy, way in the back. And then I felt the plane dip. The engines roared back to life. Like a jolt of power had just surged through the aircraft. Lights came on, loud chime, seatbelt sign dinged, and suddenly, passengers, like flipping a switch. People were talking. The flight attendants were smiling and walking the aisle. A kid was crying 2 rows away. The movie screens were working. I was standing in the aisle, still holding the passport. No one noticed me. Invisible! I waved my arms. I shouted. I grabbed a woman's shoulder. Nothing. She kept talking to the man next to her like I didn't exist. I ran to my seat, 1A, and there was a man sitting there. He looked just like me. Same jacket, same shoes, but his eyes were dead, hollow. He turned slowly and smiled, just a little, then looked away. That's when the lights flickered again, and everything went dark. When I woke up, I was sitting in my seat, 1A. The flight attendant was shaking me gently. "Sir, we've landed in London. You must have been out cold." The plane was filled with passengers. Normal noise, normal chaos. I checked my phone. 7:12 a.m. Date, March 12th, 2024. Everything looked fine. But when I got to passport control, they told me my passport had already been scanned an hour earlier by someone using my name and my face. I still have the other boarding pass, the one that says 46D, the flight number, the date, it all matches. Except, I never sat there. I never remember printing that version. Sometimes late at night, I hear that breathing again, like someone exhaling into my ear, right when I'm about to fall asleep. And sometimes I dream I'm back on that flight, alone, walking through an empty plane, while something waits for me in 46D. This happened in June 2022, during a flight from San Diego to Boston. I was flying home after a week-long work trip. My company had sent me out west for a cybersecurity conference. I wasn't exactly thrilled. I hate flying. I'm not scared of it, not really, but something about being trapped in a metal tube 30,000 feet in the air never sat right with me. This flight was overnight. Red eye, flight 1143, window seat, row 23. I remember everything because it started so normal. Until I saw the man in the dark suit. We were already buckled in and waiting for pushback when he stepped on. Tall, thin, dressed in a matte black suit with no airline logo or pin. Clean-shaven, skin almost gray in the cabin lights. He moved slowly, not like he was old, but like he was measuring each step. He didn't look at anyone. He walked to the back of the plane and sat down in the very last row, aisle seat. I only noticed him because of how unnaturally still he sat after that. Later, I'd find out the seat next to him had never been sold. About 30 minutes into the flight, I got up to use the bathroom in the back. As I passed him, I couldn't help but glance down. His eyes were open, but unfocused, wide, too wide, and there was something off about his mouth, like the corners were pulled back just a little too far. He didn't blink when I passed, didn't move, didn't breathe. I don't mean that as an expression. I mean, he wasn't breathing. No chest movement. No rise or fall. Nothing. I peed as fast as I could and got back to my seat. I flagged down a flight attendant and asked if there was an air marshal on board. She smiled too quickly. "Why do you ask?" I hesitated. "There's just a guy in the last row. He looks kind of off." She paused, then leaned in and whispered, "Sir, just don't look at him, okay? Don't talk to him. Don't acknowledge him." I blinked. "What?" But she just walked away like nothing happened. That was the first time I felt real fear. 2 hours later, turbulence hit. Bad. The kind that knocks your drink off the tray and makes the overhead bins rattle. Then the cabin lights cut out. Total darkness for about 3 seconds. When they flicked back on, I turned instinctively and saw him, the man in black, standing halfway up the aisle, facing me. Only me. The rest of the passengers seemed frozen, like they hadn't noticed the lights going out or him standing now. He tilted his head slowly. That's when I saw his smile. It had widened, too far. I panicked, got up, moved to an empty seat further up the cabin. My heart wouldn't stop racing. I stared out the window, too afraid to look back. After a while, the lights dimmed again for night mode. People went back to watching movies or sleeping, and I started convincing myself it was my imagination, until I heard the whisper, right behind me. "You shouldn't have moved." I turned, fast, nothing there. But the people around me were wrong. Their heads were all turned slightly, just enough that their eyes were pointing at me. No one blinked. No one moved. The only thing I heard was breathing, not from them. From beneath my seat, wet, gurgling, fast breathing. I stood and screamed, "Get me off this fucking plane!" A flight attendant rushed over, hushed me, pulled me toward the galley. I expected her to calm me down. Instead, she looked me straight in the eyes and said, "If he knows you can see him, it's already too late." She told me to stay in the galley while she called the captain. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. No one came. Eventually, I peeked out. The entire cabin was empty. Every single person gone. No noise, no movement, just the soft hum of engines and one blinking seatbelt sign. I walked slowly back down the aisle. My own seat was still there. So was my bag, but no people. I reached the back row again, and the man in black was sitting there, smiling. He stood up as I approached. His arms didn't swing naturally. They hung, stiff, like dead weight. I noticed for the first time that his shadow wasn't moving with him. It stayed perfectly still. He leaned toward me, impossibly close, and whispered in a voice that felt like it came inside my skull, "We don't crash, we collect." Then he opened his mouth wider, so wide I could see down into a black void that wasn't a throat. No tongue, no teeth, just darkness. I blacked out. I woke up in my seat. People around me, talking, laughing, watching movies. My seatbelt was fastened. The lights were normal. Cabin noise, engine hum, food carts, all back. I looked around wildly. No man in black. I called the attendant over. She smiled, a normal smile this time, and said we'd be landing in 15 minutes. I asked her about the marshal in the back. She frowned. "There's no marshal on this flight, sir. That seat was empty." When we landed, I checked the airline's manifest online. Row 30A, the marshal seat, had never been booked. It's been over a year. Every now and then, I check online forums, horror subs, deep Reddit aviation threads, flight crew message boards. Once, just once, I found someone who mentioned a man in black sitting in the last row of a red-eye flight. Same expression, same smile, same stillness. Their post was deleted within hours. And every now and then, when I fly at night, I feel someone behind me, watching, waiting to collect. This happened to me on a connecting flight from Denver to Salt Lake City. I had just come off a long haul from Frankfurt. My body was exhausted, my mind half fried from jet lag, and I just wanted to get home. It was a small regional jet. 2 seats on each side of the aisle. I was in seat 8A, left side, window. The weather was fine when we boarded. I wish it had stayed that way. About 30 minutes into the flight, I looked up from my phone and noticed something strange. Not the cockpit door, not the rear galley door. This was in the middle of the cabin, on the right side. It was small, plain, matte gray, like something you'd see in a supply closet or a power room. No signage, no exit markings, no crew only. And here's the thing, it wasn't there when we boarded. I swear to God, it hadn't existed when I walked down the aisle earlier. The cabin was too small to miss something like that. It looked out of place, like it didn't belong to this plane. I looked around. No one else seemed to react. Not the woman beside me, not the passengers across the aisle. Everyone was glued to their phones or books, or nodding off. I pressed the call button. The flight attendant came over, a man in his 30s, clearly tired. "Hey," I whispered, trying not to sound paranoid. "What's that door?" He frowned. "What door?" I pointed. "That one, right there, row 9, right side." He looked and paused. Then he smiled. "Oh, that's maintenance access. Nothing to worry about." Then he walked away way too quickly. 10 minutes later, the plane jolted. Seatbelt signs dinged, overhead bins rattled. The pilot's voice came on, staticky and garbled. "We're hitting some air pockets. Should smooth out in a bit." But it didn't. The turbulence got worse, harder, sharper. Like the plane was bouncing between 2 invisible walls. I looked at the strange door again. And it was open, just a crack, enough to see complete blackness inside. No lights, no equipment, just a pitch-dark void where a storage room or panel should have been. Something moved in that dark. A hand, thin, too long, pale gray skin with black fingernails. It gripped the door frame gently, not like it was trying to pull itself out, like it was waiting. I panicked. Shook the woman beside me. "Hey, do you see that? That door's open." She blinked slowly. "What door?" she said, deadpan, like she didn't even understand the word. Then she closed her eyes and fell asleep. Instantly, like someone had hit a switch. I looked back at the door. The hand was gone. The door was shut again. 10 minutes later, the man sitting in 9D, the seat next to the door, stood up to stretch. I watched him carefully. He looked down at the door, tilted his head, then he opened it, just casually, like he'd done it before. And then he stepped through, into that pitch black. The door shut behind him. I shot up from my seat and ran down the aisle. "Hey, someone just went through that door." A different flight attendant blocked me. "I'm going to have to ask you to take your seat, sir." "There was a man. He walked into the wall." She didn't flinch. "There is no door there, sir." I stormed back to my seat, heart racing, pulled out the in-flight map on the screen. Altitude, 32,000 feet. But the ground wasn't visible through the window anymore. Not clouds, not sky, just darkness. And the map? It wasn't showing our route, just a spinning symbol that said, "Recalibrating." I looked again. Now there were 2 doors, identical, one behind row 9, one behind row 17. I looked around the cabin. The lights had dimmed, but more seats were empty now. People were missing. No one had walked past me. No one had gone to the bathroom. They were just gone. And every time I blinked, another door appeared. By row 20, row 6, row 12. The last thing I remember was looking back at my own row and seeing a door right beside me, somehow between the window and the wall. And it was opening. The next thing I knew, someone was shaking me awake. "We've landed," the flight attendant said. I looked out the window. Salt Lake City. The time was correct. The people were there. Everything looked normal. Except one thing. Row 9 was missing. The seat skipped from 8 to 10. Like that row had never existed. And on the wall where the strange door had been, just smooth paneling. No seams, no frame, no handle. Like the door had never existed or had been sealed over. I looked up the flight manifest later. There were 64 passengers booked. Only 58 landed. 6 names were quietly marked as no-show. No explanation, no cancellations. No one with those names filed a missing person report. Sometimes I wonder what's behind those doors, where they lead, why they only show up when no one's looking. And sometimes, I think I still hear knocking from the other side of my window at night, even when I'm on the ground.
If you enjoyed this nightmare, like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.